Hello everyone, Flapjack Pants here, back with the 4th episode of my single player world. So, in the previous few episodes, we moved all the villagers over to our new city, as well as the pumpkin and melon farm. But today, I want to move the mob farm. What I want to do here is, over this taiga, I want to build a massive blimp. And inside the blimp will be the new mob farm. And as you can see, once we fly up to a certain Y level here in the taiga, it starts snowing. And so on top of the blimp we'll also have an ice farm and a powdered snow farm. So it's going to be kind of a 3-in-1. I first started by gathering some string from the old mob farm, which I would craft into wool. This is currently the main way I gather wool because I just think it's faster than making a manual sheep farm. Next I need some light blue dye, which I wanted because I wanted my blimp to look like the MOAB from the Bloons Tower Defense game series. I quickly realized though that manually bone mealing the swamp floor would be too slow, so I set up an impromptu flower farm like this. I never really in the past set up impromptu farms like this. I would usually always plan them out in creative, but it was nice to test my redstone abilities and kind of build something on the fly the way it was intended in this game. And soon enough I had more than enough dye to make the blue wool. Now the reason that I wanted to have a blimp instead of a hot air balloon was just because it goes all the way back to the Bloons Tower Defense once again. I really liked that game as a kid and I always wanted to build something like that in Minecraft. I gathered up some bamboo from the bamboo farm, and I also gathered up some ice from the old ice farm in the old base. Now, the blimp, as I said before, would have an ice farm on it, so this also removes our influence from that old base as well. I traded up with some villagers to get emeralds, which I would then use to get glass and clay for the decorative pots, which were newly added. I scaffolded up to the position that we would be, and I first laid out the circle of cauldrons which would make up our powder snow farm. I did this first because we would need powder snow in the farm itself, so I wanted to be able to get some while we were building so we could use it later. Instead of being like a realistic real-life blimp, I wanted to kind of be like a fantasy flying boat, and this created some constraints for how our storage system would look. So I made a very unorthodox design here, a very 2D design. So instead of using a wall of double chests with their sides facing out, I actually faced their fronts out. For sorters, I made these short sorters, which are not tileable, but I wouldn't be tiling them side to side anyways, but front to back. And so I used up some of the cookies I accidentally bought while trading with the farmers earlier to be the filter items. The way that these filters work is you only need one item to be the dummy item inside, and you need a total of 21 filter items. I then focused on just the main decorative parts of the rest of the ship, and I built up the killing area. The killing area would be a mix of soul campfires for a nice aesthetic of the fire underneath a hot air balloon kind of, but for a blimp. And also wither roses in order to kill off witches, because witches can drink fire resistance, which actually works against campfires, and I didn't know that until testing. Next up would be the blimp itself. So the mobs would spawn on platforms on one side, be funneled into a water stream on the other side, and then that would eventually carry them to the middle of the blimp where they would fall down into the killing area on the ship, as I showed earlier. And so that would involve a fair bit of redstone, which would keep an etho hopper clock either always powered on or always powered off in order to turn the farm on and off, in order to set the intervals for the water flushing to knock the mobs off their platforms. Now the platforms themselves will be made out of slabs in order to kind of destroy the mob AI and to make sure that they don't resist the water flow. I'm fairly sure this still worked in the version I was in, but if not, it's still a nice and cheap block. The etho hopper clock ran on 32 items, and this time, instead of using the redstone block as the main source of power, I actually used the sides. This way, most of the time the water would be gone, but then for a slightly shorter amount of time it would actually flush the mobs, instead of there being an equal amount of time for both. This way there would always be more mobs spawning than not being able to spawn. For the water, I use trapdoors to hold the water in, and when they're powered they will be up, but then when they're unpowered they'll be down. And so this way it's much cheaper than dispensers to kind of turn the water on and off like this. There was 3 total of these platforms, and they would all act simultaneously with a slime block and redstone block contraption. And so by this point I was most of the way done, but I still needed powder snow. So I just quickly finished up the blimp and I AFK'd a little bit to get the powder snow that I needed. And I also built up some decorations like a Sussland flag in the back. So Sussland was my nation in the NHK SMP, which I may or may not make a video about, but that's kind of the lore in my world, is that it is all a part of Sussland. And so I've actually gotten decently good, I think, at making flags look nice and organic. I then flooded the top of the blimp for the ice farm. Now I didn't realize this at the time, but you actually need solid blocks for ice to begin generating. So I would eventually add slabs and blocks into this area, so it would still be able to flood, but it would also be able to generate ice much faster. My old farm had the problem where the platform was too big, so ice would rarely generate in the middle, but because this platform is more narrow, that is avoided. I then flooded the inside of the blimp so that mobs would only spawn on the platforms where they were needed, and there were actually quite a few mobs. A creeper ended up blowing up, but I didn't catch it on camera. And the blimp was for the most part done, but I still needed the powdered snow. So here you can see me testing the ice farm, and it's very efficient. Each cycle produces about 2.5 stacks of ice, which is more than enough for my applications currently. So after AFKing for a little bit, I got a decent amount of powdered snow, but I would have to AFK for the night in order to fully fill up the farm. So next, I spawn-proofed all of the caves and all of the surface in the area based on a AFK spot that I decided would be inside the hotel. That way I could get all of the farms in range. So there was actually a pretty massive amount of caves underneath my base. They were deeper down. Closer to the surface of my world, there's not that many caves, but deeper there are a lot more, so it was really quite a hassle to get through all of them, but I eventually managed to. This process probably took somewhere between 3 to 5 hours. There was a ton of caves, and in the end I had to use a mod to make sure I was lighting up everything, and I used full bright, which I know is cheating, but if you really saw the amount of caves I had to go through, I think it saved me probably many hours of work. So now that the farm was running at probably somewhere around 80% capacity, I AFK'd overnight, and as you can see I got a few double chests of drops, a bit lacking in string, but in order to remedy that, the powder snow finally all came. So now that this is finished, I'll give you guys a full tour. So the AFK location I was talking about was right there, inside this hotel, basically right behind that glass. As you can see, if I turn on my map here, there's like a full circle of light here. This is the whole spawn radius. As you can see, the blimp is inside of it. You can see here in the old city that there's also one of these two around the old mob farm, but this is larger because the hotel is closer to the ground. So we actually fly up here. I put some target blocks up here so I could actually hit them. This instantly shoots out a weeping vine here that you can climb up and down. Unfortunately, the ground is too far down to hit anything, but hopefully in a future update they'll add something to the game that can actually reach up that high. So right now it's mainly just for the gimmick of it. So, as you can see here in the farm, there's the killing area itself, and actually right under these carpets are a line of hoppers that go around into the full storage system. These here are just for decoration. You can see right here, this is the captain's cabin. There's a bed here, which I will sleep in. Before we go down, I'll just talk about the rest of the deck. So up here there's more barrels and the actual on-off for the farm. So when this is on, the farm is off. So by turning this off, the farm is on now. You heard the trapdoors retract there. So most of this ship is just decoration. It is holding the storage system. And as I said in the building video, this is a very unorthodox storage system given the space constraints that I had. So as you can see, it's very tight. So we have gunpowder right here. You can hear some mobs up there. There's string in these two. There's random drops. And then bones. So the reason that we needed so much powdered snow is because, if you may have seen in the farm, there's a lot of kind of corners and walls, and those are perfect for spiders to climb right up. And so we wouldn't want that, so we put powdered snow at the top of those. Here, I can actually just show you guys. I'm leaving the farm on to do this. This may be a bit of a mistake, but you guys can see in here. As you can see, there's a lot of spiders in here, and it's very easy for them to climb up all of these walls. So at the top there's a line of powdered snow. If I can just get in here. Yep, there's a line of powdered snow, as you can see right there. And then there's also a line on every spawning platform so that these spiders, as you can see right there, they get stuck up there, and then instead of just waiting for them to despawn, they'll actually just die. So that way we can get slightly more string, and it also frees up the mob cap. So that's why I use a lot of powdered snow. It's not the most efficient way to do things in the world. You know, ideally you would still want a system that, you know, minimizes those kinds of cases. But I think given the constraints of the size of this whole farm, I think it all works out very well. And it's very productive. So up here, as you can see, is the ice and powdered snow farm. This right here is where I've been storing my ice and powdered snow, and I'll bring that down into the main base at some point, but for now I'll just leave it up here. And all in all, that's this project complete. So definitely in the future I'll add more of these flying blimps, probably different sizes, maybe bigger, maybe smaller. And I've also been thinking of adding ships here, like a big dockyard. Eventually I'll build it. If you've noticed, the shape of this blimp is basically just an elongated version of the ship that I had in the Prairie 10 Emporium. Probably use some more different ones for any future blimps or ships, but definitely this is a design to hold on to and one to come back to, I think. The main meat and potatoes of this whole farm, though, is definitely still the trapdoor water flushing system. This is what allows us to fit this in the shape of a blimp. And this design is actually applicable in way more other applications other than mob farms, such as a nether wart farm, which we should totally automate. Let's get to work. I started by gathering the nether wart that I still had at the old base and preparing all of my materials, namely strip logs, which I would need a lot of. If you remember, during the world tour I had some nether bricks that I accidentally left in the old smelter, which I would grab for this farm as well. First and foremost, I would renovate the second floor, which didn't really exist yet, for the honey farm. I'd always been kind of peeved that I didn't have any redstone access to that farm, because it did break every once in a while, and I would also like to be able to directly be able to add shears into the system, which is how I get wax. If you just put it into where the bottles go, it doesn't always work, and it's kind of inconsistent, and also bottles sometimes disappear, which was a pretty big issue throughout all of the time that I used this, so having this redstone access would make it a lot easier. Now, I add this redstone access because this is all behind the farm and above it, which will allow it to directly connect to the nether wart area. So I finished up some touches by adding a ceiling. Next up was the bamboo farm. So I wanted the bamboo farm directly to connect to the nether wart farm, and there wasn't really that much redstone access that we needed, so I simply broke down the wall and built a pathway straight to it. What I would do is I would add a staircase connecting to the hallway which led into the nether wart farm. And the spacing was very tight, and I had to actually replace some blocks on the farm itself, but in the end everything was able to fit pretty snugly, and I actually think I put this together pretty well in that sense. And then next was the combrutor, which I also would like redstone access to, and so I would connect that to the bamboo system that I mentioned before using a staircase. So as you can see here, we've connected the bamboo farm, the compruter, and the honey farm here. All we need is the bridge to go in between, and this is where our nether wart farm is actually going to go. It's going to be like a crossroads, and the farm is going to be underneath. I started out by marking and then digging out the area that I would need for the farm. There would be 3 layers, and each of them were about 3 blocks tall, plus the ceiling and the redstone underneath, so I did actually have to clear out a fair amount of land. In hindsight, I probably should set up a beacon for these kinds of clearing excavations, but at the end of the day, I'm always a bit too lazy for that kind of stuff. And taking down the beacons is always a nightmare too. I wish they made that easier in the game. The way the redstone would work is there would be a shulker filling system that would detect when a shulker is filled with nether wart, which I would manually put in, and the way that's done is by having a comparator on subtract mode, detecting a chest that was filled almost all the way but not all the way, so that would be redstone level 14, and then subtracting that from the shulker that we want to be filling. So as soon as it hits 15, then the difference would put out 1, which would be a redstone signal and cause the shulker to be put into a collection system. I think that this kind of manual system would be better than an automatic system, so we don't have to worry about hopper speed, because it's just one big influx of items at a time rather than a constant small stream of items, kind of like the bamboo farm for example. Now the next thing I would have to do would be to build up the farm itself, which, as I said earlier, is actually pretty similar to the MOAB farm, surprisingly. So as you can see, I'm putting in the ice and the trapdoors, and I'm building all the different platforms here. The only difference is that instead of farming mobs, I'm farming nether wart, and the shape of the platform is different. But I could totally have made the mob farm in this shape as well, and it would have worked the same. After I was done with that, I used some tinted glass. I gathered the amethyst for that off camera. This would act as the main bridge material between the different areas that I mentioned before. Now, 2 of these bridges would lead directly into the wall, and there wasn't exactly enough space to add some kind of redstone door outside of the base altogether, but I feel like it was just kind of improper to leave it as an L shape kind of dangling, so I just connected them anyways. Maybe in the future we'll find some way to compact the redstone and make a door out of it, but for now it's just leading into the wall. I added weeping vine as the main centerpiece to get between the layers, and as you can see, after running for a little while, I had a full shulker of nether wart. Now, I was actually dangerously low the entire time building this, so I used that nether wart and directly reinvested it into red nether bricks, which I would use to finish off the rest of the farm. I made the walls using a design kind of inspired by Etho's lab of these kind of repeating wall segments here. It's simple but also very complex at the same time, and it's very appealing to the eyes, I think. Also, by using stone brick, I was able to kind of use the already existing wall and the already existing parts of the bamboo farm and the compruter in order to kind of lessen the amount of building I would actually have to do. Lastly was the ceiling, and then I finished. Alright guys, so now that we're done, I'll show you guys around. So this right here is the new honey redstone access area. So this goes to the main lobby in the street. But if we go through here, this is our nether wart area. This is the bamboo farm, and then down there is the compruter. So that's how everything connects together. And then we'll just run through one cycle of this nether wart. This will turn on the water. Then it pushes everything right here. And then all I have to do is flip it again to turn it off. As soon as I get a full shulker, it immediately pushes it out, and then it puts it into our collection system right there. And so with those 2 farms done in this episode, I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.